to come from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I fought a dog that killed the calf that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to April. I hope this finds you happy and healthy and safe and well and home. Things are fine here. High atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf here in sunny Southern California, a COVID-19 hotspot. And I hope this finds you doing the same. This episode of the podcast was recorded prior to the last episode with Matt Bronger. This one was done a couple weeks before that. And then the shit hit the fan, so I moved the Bronger one up closer. But this will give us a little break. The reality of the coronavirus is not omnipresent in the conversation, so that's maybe a bit of a relief. My guest is Roger Nygard, who's a really good buddy of mine, an old friend of mine, a really, really talented director and writer, probably most famous for the documentary Trekkies and Trekkies 2. If you're listening to this podcast, you've probably seen Trekkies. He also directed the film Suckers, episodes of The Office and The Bernie Mac Show. He has a really brilliant documentary called The Nature of Existence, and this is his new documentary. It's on Amazon Prime. It's on YouTube Red, or whatever they call that. You can get it, and it's called The Truth About Marriage, and I highly recommend it. Really entertaining, so informative, enjoyed it immensely. As for me, I'm not going anywhere, so there's nothing to plug. But if you're a fan and you have Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, every day I'm posting my little pandemic minute. It's a minute-long observation about this oddly historical period that we're all living in. So before I go, let me say one little thing about our Patreon feature. We have one, and it's simple, and I hope you sign up for it. It's $5 a month, and that gets you the title of Dana Gould Hour Sky Cadet. And for that, every month you get a bonus interview segment or two. You get some video content. Give you an example. We had Jay Kogan on 2 months ago. Jay and I did a pilot called World on a String. So if you're on our Patreon, you can see that. I found a bunch of video as I was reorganizing my files. We're putting that slowly up on the Patreon. Rob Cohen's and my super adventure team is going up. Some other stuff that I did that never made it to air or was on the air, but you can't access it streaming. And, we don't have different levels. It's $5. I'm not going to charge you, give me $73.50 and I'll come to your house and wash your dog. It's $5. You're a Sky Cadet. You get a little bonus stuff. You get some video stuff. Everybody's happy. We go on with our lives. So go to danagould.com for details on all of this stuff. But for now, you're home, wash your hands, sit back, relax, and enjoy our filthy business. The Dana Gould Hour, free and worth it. It is yet another in a series of beautiful days here high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf. Here in sunny Southern California, it's inching out of winter towards a blazing hot spring. And I'm sitting here with an old friend of mine who's a filmmaker who has given us not only the documentary Trekkies and Trekkies 2, he then went on to tackle his third documentary, The Nature of Existence, just a small bite topic. And his new doc, which I have just seen last night and this morning, which is so fucking good. is called The Truth About Marriage, a documentary. And it's one of those things where when I interview somebody that has a documentary or has a book, you like, okay, I'll get through it and this was just like, we started watching it and we were in. It really.
You and your wife?
Well, I don't have the term. My
girlfriend,
live in adult female social companion. That's actually, I've talked about this before. Well, anyway, Roger Nygard.
Hey, this is me, Roger.
Yeah, you're also
jumping in.
Also a comedy writer and former comedian.
I've never done stand-up comedy, but I worked for a company that managed comedians. Okay. That's how I got into that world. Rollins, Jaffe, Moore, and Bresner.
Right.
It was my first job.
Okay, so that's how we met. How we met. Well, but you're also a writer.
We met in the lobby of a movie theater in Dallas, Texas, at the USA Film Festival when you were there for a film that you were acting in called Courting Courtney.
Wow.
And I think I was there with, was it Trekkies maybe? My
probably,
first documentary.
Yeah.
Or
no, because we knew each other before Trekkies.
Oh, probably.
Because I was supposed to be in Trekkies.
Yes.
And I couldn't do it, and that's when I referred you
Matt
to Matt
Weinhold. Right.
I think it probably made
great.
You Jake.
That's true. Yeah, Jake Johansson.
Yeah.
Who's in this. Actually, I try to put Jake in everything. He's in my film Suckers, playing a customer. He's in my action film Back to Back, playing a police officer. And in this documentary, The Truth About Marriage.
Yeah, you make narratives and you make docs. You ping pong back and forth.
And I'm editing now a lot, like TV shows like Veep and Curb Your Enthusiasm are what pay for the documentaries.
Right. We all have that. We all have our day job. You're smart.
Genius. I prefer genius.
Genius. You have to diversify.
Right. You got to evolve. You got to be willing to evolve as needed.
Yes. Evolution does not favor the strong. It favors that most adaptable to change.
Well put.
We'll be right back. I want to get right into the truth about marriage for what we were just talking about. Now, I was married and I got divorced, and now I'm in another very serious. They say serious relationship, like there's no humor in it, which is a very, very wonderful, healthy, committed, great relationship
with consequences.
And it is. You learn from your past mistakes, and you also see the alchemy of different personality types, and the people that you choose to be with, elect to be with. And the first issue that is raised in the documentary that you made is something that I actually have a joke about in my act, which is the concept that marriage is, quote, till death do you part, which I say is just God's way of saying, I can get you out of this. It's a little extreme. And we've only been, according to your research, was something that I learned in the doc, we've only been marrying for love for less than 200 years.
Yeah, about 160 or so years.
Yeah.
They can point. They can point out exactly when this started, this love thing.
So when people say, like, I was thinking literally this morning, they said when gay marriage is, because I was reading this thing about Pete Buttigieg and his husband, strange, he has a weird name, like Charter or some weird name. But they were saying how, gay marriage will be the downfall of Western civilization, and guys will marry lamps, and it just happened, and with a shrug, and same with legalizing marijuana, with decriminalizing marijuana, all these things like that. This is going to end the world. Fluoridation is going to end the world. Gay marriage is going to end the world. It's going to end the world, and people, no, it's fine.
Natural human behaviors are going to end the world. That's what people eventually they settle on these things. Well, this human behavior is horrible.
Yeah, well, but that goes back to I guess Christianity
and structural societies, institutions in general like to control human behavior, and particularly sexual behavior.
Yeah, well, it's always get them where they're ashamed, and you can. Yeah, it's all about. It's
about survival of the tribe too, and reproduction. What's best for the tribe? What's best for you may not be what's best for the tribe.
And that goes to So let me rewind, because I want to get into that, which goes into the book Sex at Dawn.
Christopher Ryan's book.
Right, Christopher Ryan's book, who's in your documentary, about the difference between the modern conception of a human relationship as exemplified by marriage versus how we evolved naturally, which is much more like what chimpanzees do.
Yeah, bonobos, chimpanzees, and humans share a common ancestor that was equally as horny as we are. Apparently, must have been. And that's what Chris Ryan covers this extensively in Sex at Dawn. It's his thesis that the way we live now is different from the way we've lived most of human history. Humans have been around for about 200,000 years. We've been getting married in some form or another only about maybe 5% of human history, that's a small percentage, right, compared to 95%? What's the bigger number?
Just, according to the Bible, which is the only real source, we've only been here for 47 years.
Yeah, there may be some inaccuracy in their data, according to some of the other data.
Somebody said the Bible. Of course, the Bible has all the answers. It's written by a group of old men who didn't know where the sun went at night.
And wanted to stay in power.
Yeah, exactly. But
so, of course, it favors them.
But so before we get into Christopher Ryan's book, what led you to this documentary?
Oh, my own failure as a human being, which I thought because I was failing at relationships.
Right.
And I get obsessed. All my documentaries
have you been married and divorced?
No, it's a single guy pontificating about marriage.
Right.
Which is part of the charm.
That's also your approach. When you made Trekkies, you weren't a specific Star Trek fan.
No, I was an outsider looking in.
So you're able to go in objectively.
That's what I do with all my docs.
Right.
I'm an outsider looking in, whether it was Star Trek fans or whether I did a documentary called 6 Days in Roswell about UFO fanatics, where I was outside. I wonder, what are these people like? Or in existentialism or religions. I went with the nature of existence. I went to the source of every major religion, found an expert, and interrogated him or her about why are we here? What is the point?
But also, 6 Days in Roswell is also about religion.
Well, it's like a religion, yes.
And the belief system and the ability to accommodate things that are factually disproven. It's very, there's a very religious aspect to it.
Something about human beings makes us susceptible to believing things without data. And Carl Sagan covers this in his book, The Demon Haunted World. That was the first place I read about this, where he said that when humans were evolving, if a child was afraid to go out into the darkness of the bushes because there's monsters out there, that child's going to survive. A child who's not afraid of demons in the bushes is going to go out there and get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. And a child will, if a child says, there's a monster under my bed, that child believes it's really, there's a monster there. We know there's no monster. That's proof of human ability to believe something that isn't there. And growing into adulthood, we still have these vestiges of these abilities to believe in things that aren't there. That was Sagan's approach to explaining this.
Can you only come to that level of understanding if wearing a turtleneck? Because I think that's what kills California. It's too hot for turtlenecks, and all of our thinkers have left. So did you have one specific long relationship that hit the skids and you went, what am I doing wrong?
I wrote a book to go along with The Truth About Marriage.
Right.
And when I wrote it, I left all that information out, what you just asked me. And my publisher said, people are going to want to know who you are and why you're talking about this.
Right.
So I wrote an introduction that answers that question, my personal information, which is 3 times I've been in love, where I was imagining getting married, having children, living together, moving in that direction. And each time it ended disastrously. And
that's so funny you say that 3 times, because you've had more than 3 relationships.
Oh, yeah. Many more than 3, but 3 where I was in love.
I've been in love 4 times.
How do you know you're in love?
You just know.
Because it hurts so much. If you're not in love, it doesn't hurt that much.
Yeah. No, that's very true. It's very true. It's very true.
In Making the Nature of Existence, Padre Pio said, who was this priest in Italy who was known for curing people and became a saint eventually, said that love equals suffering.
Certainly the way I do it. I would add to that, the reward is the deepest. The hurt is equivalent to the joy.
Yes. When I interviewed Daniel Gilbert, who wrote the book Stumbling on Happiness, he's a psychology professor at Harvard. I read his book, tracked him down, interviewed him, and I asked him about happiness. Who's happier? Someone who has children or someone without children? Do children make you happier? Because that's sort of the common understanding, right? Children will make you happier. And he did research on this specifically, and he said when they took couples with children and without, and had them fill out little forms, happiness forms, how happy are you every once an hour for 2 weeks or however long it was, they found they were about equally happy. Although without children, just slightly happier, a few percentage points happier, because having children is a lot of hard work. They're selfish. They want your time. They take all your money. You don't get any sleep. And it's difficult. And he said that people rated doing housework, like vacuuming, the same as interacting with their children.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
numerically
that's a false belief.
But here's the thing he said. This was his conclusion, that even though it's difficult, children they lowered the number, like the percentage of happiness of the moment. Those moments of great extreme happiness come with "Daddy, I love you.
Yeah.
Here's my report card," and that outweighs all these horrible moments of cleaning up poop and doing diapers.
Sure. I mean, to me, and I don't want to get too off topic. My childhood wasn't particularly awesome, and I've gotten the greatest joy in my life from ending that cycle and from giving my children the childhood that I wish that I had.
Just because you didn't have the amazing childhood you maybe wish you had, let's say you had that, you'd be a different person today.
100%.
And maybe you wouldn't be doing a podcast and entertaining.
I wouldn't change anything.
Maybe you'd be in jail. You're right.
I would not. No, I would be if I had I'd be a boring person living in somewhere in Massachusetts. No, I wouldn't change anything. And I'm aware of how incredibly fortunate I am that I can look at my life and go, no, I honestly wouldn't change anything. You want to go about doing a documentary on the nature of, is it marriage or intrapersonal romantic erotic relationships? Because what I found fascinating about the documentary was how many different permutations of, quote, marriage, unquote, that we have today and are functional. And I saw myself in so many of them. And then there are some that I just could not conceive of.
For you.
Yeah. For example, Guy, he and his wife have 3 kids. They get divorced. He remarries. They all live in the same house.
Keeping the original wife and the new wife in the same house together.
Yeah. Somebody, there's your show. Go pitch it. But that to me is mind-boggling. I don't know how that is accomplished. Or these people that got married in a fairy festival.
Yes, of course in Oregon.
Of course in Oregon. And they live in a polyamorous quasi-medieval commune. I admire the off-the-grid nature of that. I like it's pretty DIY. I don't see how that works long-term in the same way that I'm sure they look at committed monogamous relationships and can't see how those work.
Well, 50% fail.
How was
right?
sex with Greg? I can't, I'm never going to ask the woman I love that, how was sex with that new dude that lives in that converted school bus down by the lake?
You might ask your best friend that. You might ask me, right? If we were best friends and you could say, hey, how'd it go on your date? So you're not best friends with your spouse in that same way.
No, but, and this is the crux of the book, Sex at Dawn, which is that we started out in a tribe. Like, here's one thing that I learned in your documentary, and we'll use it as the jumping off point. Chimpanzees have huge vaginas, and the male chimpanzees have huge testicles because they do this thing called sperm warfare, which the only time I've heard that phrase before in my life was when I decided not to pledge a frat. But we started out much in the way that chimpanzees are, which is when the female goes into, what's it called?
When she's ovulating.
Thank you.
In heat.
Yeah, in heat. When she's ovulating, her vagina swells up like a whoopee cushion.
Her entire backside turns red and swollen.
Yeah. And she basically mates with every chimp in the whatever it's called. I think it's called a band. It's a herd of cows, a pack of dogs, and a scrote of bros. A full scrote of bros went to the volleyball game.
There's no jealousy. Everybody.
Yeah, there's no jealousy
shares
at all.
That vagina.
Yeah.
And anyone could be raising, and the children, the small chimpanzees could be anyone could be the father. And and that's a way to keep the child protected and alive, is for everyone to think they could be the father.
Right. And that's how Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, Java, that's how early Homo sapiens were.
That's what the data suggests. And it seems like humans lived in tribes for about the most 180,000 years, where they shared everything. And this is Chris Ryan's thesis. They shared shelter, raising children, sex, food. Anything you had belonged to the tribe. And because they were nomads, the only thing you own is what you could carry. So It was that type of a society. And when things changed is when humans discovered the concept of agriculture. And then they started, I'll just stay right here and plant these crops, and we don't need to travel around anymore. And now the idea of propriety, ownership occurs. Well, I own this land.
Right. Chris Ryan says that agriculture is the worst thing that ever happened to humanity.
To the happiness of our species, it changed our health. It added warfare, crowding, more disease, and all sorts of negative aspects, which he now...
Ownership.
In his new book, it's called Civilized to Death. He talks about that at great length. So this idea of ownership occurs, and now men are thinking, well, I want to make sure that I pass my belongings, my land, my animals, my wife. I want to pass everything I own down to my children or to my genetic offspring. I want to make sure it's my genetic offspring that are inheriting my land and goods. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to make sure that your wife is not having sex with anyone else. Now, a woman knows it's her baby because it comes out of her body. There's no doubt it's her baby. But a man can't be sure.
Right.
Mommy's baby, daddy's maybe, unless he's doing what they call practicing mate guarding. 24/7, he's got his eye on her and making sure that she's not having sex with anyone else, which is, according to Chris Ryan's thesis, contrary to what's natural for human beings. Now, the way to do that, or at least one way, is when the man is out working in the field or hunting, he's got to be away at times, now that he's staying in one place and working a farm, is create this social fence around women that keeps that controls their sexual behavior, and that marriage
this
becomes
is before the
that.
low jack.
Now, GPS, right? You can tell where someone is.
Yeah, but it's a social barrier
to control women's sexual behavior, so a man can be sure it's his genetic offspring. So that's was the primary purpose, or one primary purpose of marriage.
Well, as in all, and marriage, it was always, up until 160 years ago, about property, wealth, power.
Yeah, well, look at adultery.
It was either a political agreement or a business agreement or a military agreement.
Yeah,
and that's when
combining
people talk
families.
and that's when people talk about traditional marriage. I'm like, you don't even have an army. How are you talking about a traditional marriage?
Yeah, which tradition?
Yeah, whose army are you merging?
So if you look at the Bible or the Torah or most religious texts, when they talk about adultery, it's a sin for women, not men. Women are punished for it.
Yeah, because who wrote the book?
And who gets pregnant?
Bunch of hot dudes. That's the one thing we know about the Bible, was it was written by a bunch of hot dudes.
So this idea of traditional marriage, if you ask somebody, they tend to think, well, it's the 1950s, right? But that one decade out of 200,000 years, it's a blip. It's actually an anomaly in what's natural. What's natural is what people do
and by the way,
rules.
And a lot of the 50s the 50s was great. What Americans point to the 50s as the sort of Rosetta Stone of what our culture should emulate. It's for upper middle class white people. For upper middle class white Christians, it was pretty cool. For a lot of other people, it was dog shit. It's like,
Traditional would be more likely what we did for 95% of our history.
Right.
Not less than 1% of 1% of our history.
Right. Yeah. But there's no, we don't know if there's any going back. We're at an interesting.
Well, polyamory is one attempt to go back in that direction towards tribe.
Right. And when you interviewed tell us a little bit about the polyamorous couple that's featured in your documentary, because they do seem to have a very functional, healthy relationship.
They're very high functioning in their relationship, and the reason
they're off the grid, and they're not just off the grid in terms of they have a non-traditional marriage. They live in a non-traditional structure. They're not like the swingers down the block.
Swinging is a different concept.
Yeah. No, that's what I meant. Like, these people live in their own culture.
Yes, one reason that polyamory can work is not because they have sex with other people. It's because in order to be polyamorous, you have to be completely honest with your partner,
right,
about what you need, who you are, and so that your needs are met. And so you're not a surprise. Neither one of you is a surprise to each other.
Right.
Traditional dating.
See, I'm still on a first-year fart hole. I'm just living a lie.
Well, when you went on your first date, you probably put on your best Dana Gould. Here I am.
Oh, sure.
Everything, I'm going to give you my best mask. And whoever you're dating, they put on their best mask. And so it's a mask dating a mask. And eventually you can't keep that mask up forever, and it's going to slip. And then you're going to be frustrated, or someone's going to get frustrated and unhappy because, well, I didn't know that's who you were. I thought you were something else. Polyamorists, They know who they are right from the start.
Yeah, that's as my dad would say. First year nobody shit stinks.
Yeah,
yeah, They do. They know who they are. And then there's still that sense of I don't. Well, he said a really interesting thing. You asked him how he knew, I'm paraphrasing, how he knew she was the one for him. And he said it was because she said I could do anything I wanted
with anybody.
Yeah. Which is very surprising when you hear it, because they look like a pretty normal group of people. And then he said, when she said that, I said, I want to do everything with you.
I want to do you a lot more instead.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you think it's going to be a story about this woman that tells this guy you can fuck anybody, and he says, I just want to fuck you. But that's not what happens. So they have multiple relationships.
They practice what they call situational polyamory. And there are many varieties of polyamory. And this particular one that they practice is they will remain monogamous until they decide we're going to have a polyamorous evening. They talk about it and they decide we're going to do it. Or maybe one of them is.
Right.
And so it's discussed in advance. And each one has a veto. You can say, no, I don't want you to do that. Or, great, I can't wait to hear how it went.
Right.
Whatever. So the situation is so the situation will come up when one of them decides to be polyamorous.
Right. And they also, I don't know how they make a living. Like, that was the other, these people that
they work Renaissance fairs.
Okay.
And have a traveling tavern called Oberon's Tavern.
Great. As long as they've got a shtick.
Well, have you been to Ren fairs?
I've been to the Ren fair here, which I still refer to as ill-advised bustier fest. And it's pretty crazy, but I just remember my daughter who at the time, Dad, I just never thought I'd hear this. Dad, yeah, can I get a dagger? Sure. So she has a dagger.
One thing I went to several Ren fairs with them, and one thing I learned, I was told by Ren fair people, is that when they go to a Renaissance fair and dress up, put on a bustier or whatever, eat the big turkey leg, they are putting on a costume so they can be themselves.
Sure, and that tracks.
Not to be someone else. And in their regular life, when they go to the office, that's where they're putting on a costume to be somebody else.
Sure, and that makes perfect sense. Now tell me if this is something that really happened, and you are the perfect person to ask. Late 80s, early 90s, I was writing on the Ben Stiller show, and word got to us that Star Trek cosplayers were going to Ren fairs in original series outfits as if they were visiting a Renaissance planet. And it became such a constant that the Renaissance fair people had to step in and intervene and ask them to stop doing it. And I'm hoping that the argument was kept in character.
Go back to your ship.
Because because you could say that their very presence there was in violation of the Prime Directive. And that we were trying to make that a Ben Stiller show sketch, and somehow it ended up as cops in the Middle Ages. I forget, it changed drastically.
I want to believe that's true. I love that. Well, someone listening to this is probably going to maybe rekindle that idea.
Yeah, that would be great. It seems like, yeah, and they would first observe from the outskirts. But I love that. I love that stuff so much. I'm not laughing at their expense. I think it's great, and I'm envious of people that can be that into something, that it really does. And it does, your alternate world is really your nourishing reality. And then your work world is, it's one for me, one for them, one for me, one for them.
Well, that's the same concept behind my Doc the Truth About Marriage. What I discovered is that everybody's frustrated in their relationships and marriages because our culture asks us to behave in a way that's out of sync with who we are as a human or as a species. And you can't reach, or it's almost impossible, virtually impossible to reach these ideals that our culture, society, parents, friends set for us.
Yes.
And we're all falling short.
Yes. And one of the great lines, there's so many great lines, and I was just frantically writing things. The one that really killed me was, a marriage is not a relationship. It is a series of relationships between two people that are constantly changing.
Yeah.
And that really rang my bell, specifically. And the other thing that really rang my bell was, look at how you plan your wedding as the blueprint of how your marriage is going to go. And boy, that's where you really needed to interview me because,
honey, what color do you want for these napkins? And if you say, you know what, you decide, honey, that's setting the trajectory for the power structure for the entire marriage.
And that is exactly what happened. I mean, the one thing I learned is, don't say I don't care, because you care.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it doesn't. Don't say I don't care. My ex-wife is, an executive, and she's got incredibly high executive function, and she's very task oriented, and she said, we're going to do this, and bang, we're going to do this, and thank God she was, because I'm not.
Right, we're meant to complete each other, not duplicate each other.
And I give her all the credit in the world for dragging me by the eyelids into adulthood. But when we had a great wedding in Hawaii, a bunch of friends, best wedding ever, and I was just like, yeah, just whatever you want. That's good. I'll be there. I'll show up. You look back and you go, oh, that was a giant fuck up. With only good intentions, that was a fuck up. Like that, you can fuck up non-maliciously, and there's a lot
we're set up to fail.
Yeah.
Our society sets us up to fail.
Yeah. That was a fuck up. That was a fuck up. That was a fuck up. But
no one teaches you. No one taught you in high school the right answer for that question, how to have a relationship.
Yes.
Why isn't there a class on how to do the most important thing you're going to experience in your life?
Well, there's something that they say in your documentary that shocked me, which is that, and I think it was the rabbi that says it.
Rabbi Laser Brody.
His first name is Laser.
Yeah.
I don't know. You'll know when I tell you. People don't want to date their clone.
Oh.
So all of the dating app algorithms are wrong.
Dr. John Gottman said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's true. And it was true. It's like, yes.
Yeah, and the social psychologist Benjamin Carney, he echoed that. They both talked about how there's no way to tell. You can give 2 people or 50 or 1,000 people the same questionnaire of 1,000 questions, have them all figured out. There's no way to tell by comparing those answers who's going to be a good match until they sit across from each other and get a sense of how the other person makes them feel.
Right.
You have to meet someone. So the best way to find someone is to get out and meet a lot of people. And so they said the best dating apps are the one that just show you what do they look like? Are you kind of attracted to their physicality? And how close are they? Are they geographically desirable?
Really?
Those are the only 2 coefficients that really matter. And then you got to get together and sense chemistry and attitude and behavior, body language. When you're next to someone, our bodies are processing a lot of data that's below our conscious awareness and telling you whether that person is a good mixture genetically for offspring. And if they are, we get a sense of passion. If you kiss somebody, and there's no spark, just no spark. Right. That's because your bodies are doing the analysis and coming back with not a good match. And what they found was that it was about complementary immune systems versus dissimilar immune systems. You are attracted to someone whose immune system is the opposite of yours or different, because a child has a better chance at survival when the combination of parents' genetics are opposite, not the same immune system.
It's a more well-rounded palate.
That we perceive as passion, chemical attraction. Mm-hmm. And people think they have free will. There's no free will involved in that.
Yeah, passion is, again, what I learned in the documentary. All passion is attraction plus an obstacle.
Yes.
It's intermission. Rise and stretch time.
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded blaggity blah blah blah? Marriage. Same-sex marriage became legal in Massachusetts in 2004, in California in 2008. Finally, in June of 2015, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, ruled in favor of legalizing marriage for same-sex couples. In a strongly worded dissent, Chief Justice John Roberts argued that the issue of same-sex marriage should be decided not by the courts, but by the public process. This is what he wrote. He says, "It's not about whether, in my judgment, the institution of marriage should be changed to include same-sex couples. It's instead about whether, in our democratic republic, that decision should rest with the people, acting through their elected representatives, not the Supreme Court." What he was basically saying was a rather elegant version of the common argument of social conservatives at that time, which was, we are a democracy. If gay people want the right to marry, put it on the ballot. We'll have a referendum and vote on it. But here's the problem. We don't put people's rights up for a vote. That's why they're called rights. So they can't just be taken away when the mob decides it's a bad idea. Now, supposedly, Americans have been granted by God, stay with me, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it was successfully argued that the right to marry was a fundamental pillar of the pursuit of happiness. And that's how that all went down. But let's go back to what Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts said. Marriage could, quote, include same-sex couples or retain the historic definition. What's the historic definition?
You make man like me? No. Woman, friend for you. Woman, friend, yes. I want friend like me.
Yes, humans have always wanted friend. But that wasn't always the point when it came to marriage. The modern conception of marriage goes back to the early 1300s. But back then, marriages were used basically as a way to ensure an economic alliance between two families. The actual bride and groom had very little, if anything, to ever say about it. 9 times out of 10, they probably hadn't even met each other. I mean, even by today's standards, we have common law marriage. 2 people have been together long enough, so we give them all the rights that married couples have. Okay, in the United States, 26 states say you can marry your first cousin. Mormons practice polygamy, which is a husband with a bunch of wives. There's also polyandry, a wife with a lot of husbands. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's hard to take marriage as this awesome sacred covenant in a culture with shows like The Bachelor, which is a game show that gives away a marriage at the end instead of a washing machine. Now, most of the arguments about traditional marriage come from those who see marriage not as a social contract, but as a religious sacrament. And that goes back to the Apostle Paul, who said that basically people are going to fuck, and if you're going to fuck, you should get permission from the church, and we call this marriage. So even in the Catholic Church's initial concept of marriage, it had nothing to do with love. It was just they knew you were going to get it on, and they wanted you to ask them for permission first. And it took them 1,500 years to finally say, oh yeah, when that happens, a priest should do it, and you need some witnesses too. What's love got to do with it? Nothing. In Rome, in the 2nd century BC, there was a Roman senator who kissed his wife in public, and he was kicked out of the Senate because they said that behavior was disgraceful. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the European aristocracies viewed extramarital affairs as the highest form of romance, as they were untainted by the gritty realities of daily life. It wasn't until the late 17th and 18th centuries that students of the Enlightenment happened upon a belief that will have a very familiar ring to it: the pursuit of happiness. This was the first mention of the concept of marrying for love and nothing but. Then, by the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution allowed young men to select their spouse and pay for the wedding themselves. But this was still men choosing women. The idea of marriage law being gender neutral, the idea of women being as full an equal partner in a marriage contract did not become largely universal until about 1970. And then you add birth control and the growing belief that women should have autonomy over their bodies, and that further revised the modern definition of what a marriage really was. Now, marriage is viewed as a personal contract between 2 equals, seeking love, stability, and happiness. And this pursuit cannot be denied anyone based on their sexual orientation. Traditional marriage is just an idea. It's an idea of whatever version of marriage makes you feel comfortable. And those ideas and definitions change over time. As we said, a lot of people have a terrible view of what marriage really is based on movies, where more often than not, marriage is the reward you get after a long period of search and struggle, and it signals the end of all your life's problems. Contraire! But seriously, how many romantic comedies end with the guy and the girl finally walking down the aisle to live supposedly happily ever after? So now, imagine how messed up people found The Graduate when it was released in 1967.
Listen, everybody, I want you all to be quiet. I've got Ben's college yearbook here, and I just want to read you some of the wonderful things about Ben.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. Aren't you?
The Graduate, as you all know, tells the story of young Benjamin Braddock, played by Dustin Hoffman, a somewhat stiff young man described in the novel as a walking surfboard who played by the rules, did really well in school, then graduated from college and realized he didn't know who he was, he didn't know what he was, and he didn't know what anything in his life meant. He ends up having an affair with Mrs. Robinson, played by Anne Bancroft. Mrs. Robinson is the wife of his father's business partner, who is played by the great Murray Hamilton. Anyway, once that affair gets underway, Ben finally decides what he wants out of life. Unfortunately, it's Mrs. Robinson's daughter. Okay. Now, the thing about The Graduate is it is very much a movie of its time. The original novel was published in 1963, but by the time the film was made, what we now think of as the 60s was just getting underway, and Ben Braddock was embraced as the voice of a generation. That generation being the baby boomers. Born after World War II, they came of age in the late 1960s to protest the Vietnam War, revolutionize women's rights, and bring sex, drugs, and rock and roll into the mainstream. With mixed results. The Graduate 2 ends in a wedding, with a young couple marching down the aisle, supposedly heading off to live happily ever after. At least that's what the parents of the young couple want. In fact, in the movie, we don't even know who the groom is. You see, after his affair with Mrs. Robinson, Ben, in an act of galactic hubris, decides that the only woman on Earth who can make him happy is the daughter of the woman he's been having an affair with. Here's an idea, Ben. What if you dated, I don't know, any other woman on the face of the earth? Literally any other living human female over the age of 18 would be a better choice than the one you just made. Nope. Okay. This, by the way, was tried in reality some years later by Woody Allen with equally disastrous results. Okay, so this is what happens. Ben has an affair with Mrs. Robinson. Mrs. Robinson's daughter comes home for a visit from college. She goes to Berkeley. Mr. Robinson, not realizing that Ben is sleeping with Mrs. Robinson, arranges for him to take his daughter out on a date. Mrs. Robinson thinks it's a terrible idea, but she can't tell him why. Ben also thinks it's a terrible idea, but he can't tell anybody why. But he can't get out of it, so he takes her out and, what do you know, falls in love. Mrs. Robinson, to protect her daughter from Ben, understandably, tells her daughter Elaine the whole sordid story. Elaine, horrified, returns to Berkeley. And here is where The Graduate goes off the goddamned rails. Ben decides that he wants Elaine Robinson. It doesn't matter that she disgusts him and that he destroyed her parents' marriage. He wants her. And as Woody Allen said, the heart wants what it wants. Which, if you whittle off all the bullshit, boils down to me wanty. So Ben does the only thing he can do. He goes up to Berkeley and stalks her. That's it. That's The Graduate. Ben is a stalker. He moves to Berkeley and starts following Elaine Robinson around, lurking around her classroom. Then he starts asking her to marry him. And then, of course, she falls in love with him. Nope, wouldn't happen. Don't buy it. Hats off to Catherine Ross for making it work on screen, but there it is. So, long story short, the Robinsons realize the only way to keep these crazy kids apart is to marry Elaine off to some Jared Kushner-looking dude from Santa Barbara. Ben crashes the wedding. Now, in the book, written in '63, Ben crashes the wedding just before the priest declares them man and wife. In the movie, Ben crashes the wedding just after the priest declares them man and wife. But Ben doesn't care about your rules, man, and neither does Elaine. And so they run out of the church together, supposedly to live happily ever after. Truth be told, the movie does win back a little bit of its points in the very last shot, where the giddy smiles leave Ben and Elaine's faces, and they're stuck sitting next to each other on a city bus, two strangers, not knowing where they are going or what the hell to do with themselves or each other. I think Mr. Robinson is actually the character that sums it up best.
Larry, if we make an effort today, we might be able to save August. August? For Christ's sake, tomorrow's the 4th of July, and we will be open for business. It's going to be one of the best summers we've ever had. Now, if you fellas are concerned about the beaches, you do whatever you have to make them safe. But those beaches will be open for this weekend.
I know. That wasn't The Graduate. But it was Mr. Robinson. Murray Hamilton went on to play Mayor Larry Vaughn in Jaws. And I like Jaws more than The Graduate, so I put that in there. What are you going to do?
Sue, honey.
Oh, Larry.
If you want to, Sue, your mother and I, we can make arrangements for you to begin school at State U this fall with Larry instead of at the junior college.
If we want to.
Then, if you two get along, in school, that is, then perhaps at Christmas vacation or at Easter vacation, we'll be glad to announce the engagement.
Oh, Larry!
I remember reading a thing when we first had kids about put your wife before your kids. I was like, well, that's crazy.
Who said that?
Somebody I read somewhere, but it was true in the sense of like, you have to make time for your partner.
But you don't do that naturally.
No, you don't do that naturally. And you know,
because who can
there's certainly a chapter in my personal book that we're just like, with only the good intentions, being a parent, you know, made a lot of those mistakes of like,
right.
You know,
you start out where your partner is the primary person in your life. And then when you have children, the child becomes more important.
Sure.
And so that changes the power structure of the relationship, and you have to adjust to that. And here, think of it this way. Who is easier to replace, a child or a spouse? You can't replace a child. They're irreplaceable. But people switch partners, spouses all the time.
Yeah.
And so you got to get used to this new structure.
Easy, Nygard. No, it's really true, and it's fascinating. Have there been studies done about how dating apps have negatively or positively affected either marriage rates or – because I have never been on a dating app. And I started dating my wife in 1995, and I was in that relationship until 2013. And then I dated a couple people, never got to an app, and then
you're a quick deal closer, apparently.
Well, I dated a couple people, and then a couple years later, and then I met Kat, and I knew people that I knew, or were in my social circle and things like that, and so I'm blissfully ignorant of what they do, and I've spoken to people, men and women, that would just like. It's like ordering a pizza. You go on the app and you go get laid.
Too many choices.
Being an Irish Catholic from Massachusetts, the fact that sex is that easily available is just like, yeah, it's better. I don't know about that. It's better I didn't because that was just like, Danny, you haven't eaten or bathed in weeks. I'm online. I can't talk to you right now.
Well, yeah, it's a crisis of choice. Humans don't like too many choices. And
no,
done
it's mind-boggling.
At the grocery store, too many mustard brands and people, their brain overloads.
Yeah,
we like three, 4, 5 choices.
Well,
and that's it.
That's absolutely the case with television now, with entertainment.
It's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. I know. I get anxiety driving down Sunset Boulevard. There's these billboards for these shows, a show I've never heard of on a platform I've never heard of, and I should watch it because it's from the creators of 2 other things I've never fucking heard of. It's like
there's all these women you've never heard of out there just waiting for you is what the app promises.
Yeah, and
then you can because it's so easy to swipe and switch and try again. There's less motivation to make one work.
Yeah, and someone said it's just a way to judge photos. This also comes up in the doc, and it's something that I have absolutely felt, is that one of the things that kills relationships is the false belief that we have learned from books, movies, television, that there's a true love out there, a perfect soulmate and that you're going to meet, and then it's effortless.
Yeah, that's wrong.
And it's just not true. And that, it's like, 7 months later, there's a problem at the end of any.
It's a lot of effort involved.
Well, that's why the
Dr. Gottman, who you pointed out, Dr. Gottman, one of his main points is that a relationship naturally deteriorates if you don't put conscious effort into it.
Conscious effort, yes.
It's naturally going to fall apart. Your relationship is going to naturally end if you don't put work into it daily, or at least consciously on a regular basis.
Right. Yes, consciously on a daily basis.
He's got it down to a science, like the 5-to-1 ratio that you need to have for a stable relationship for the best chance of longevity, a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative experiences. So it's not necessarily couples that fight a lot aren't going to last, or if couples that never fight are going to last longer. They have equal chance as long as they hit the 5-to-1 ratio. Couples that argue a lot, that means a lot of flowers, I love you, hugs, back rubs. Whereas if they never argue, flowers once a year is probably enough.
Well, it's interesting. I know people that fight all the time, and they will tell you they're in a happy, healthy, great relationship. I am not conflict oriented. I do not dig fighting if it's avoidable. The relationship I'm in now, she is the first person I've met who feels the same way. It's like there's no reason to go to this place over this.
Right, so you don't have to hit as many positives. And what he said was actually 5-to-1 is the minimum threshold. If you can hit 20-to-1, that's even better. A lot of I love yous and touch on the arm and hugs and I miss you. Positives, as opposed to the negatives: rolling the eyes, exasperation, condescension, arguing, yelling are the obvious ones. But little ones, like an eye roll, that's a negative.
Yeah.
You do an eye roll, you need 5 positives to make up for it.
5-to-1.
To keep a relationship stable and to last.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And a lot of it is just, and I wonder about this, I used to think that empathy was an innate human trait, and now it actually seems rare.
And it's necessary to show empathy to your partner.
Yeah.
To
other human beings.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it is being phased out of our makeup as a way to survive in our
overloaded world,
overloaded dystopian landscape.
Yeah, it's filling us with negative emotions, and you got to protect yourself.
Yeah, I mean, they say males have less empathy because they had to go out and kill,
and women have to understand what this 2-year-old infant wants, who can't talk.
Right.
So they have to be able to empathize with this human.
Yeah. Drive around downtown LA, and you see people living in tents, and you can't run up and save everyone. And
right, how do you handle that?
How do you handle it? I mean, you drive by it or you walk by it.
You have to build up a callus.
Yeah, and it's I've noticed it getting harder, because I think for many reasons here in Southern California, a specific perfect storm of bad economic policies meeting human greed has resulted in a crisis of homelessness, a fully avoidable crisis of people who don't have a roof over their head at night. And it's very, very hard to see. And not like hard to see, I don't like to look at this. Hard to see, I don't like to see people in misery. And you didn't used to, 5 years ago, every underpass wasn't a tent city. And now they are. And how do you
go home
accept or shut yourself off to that? People think like before the Civil Rights Act, how could you go to a restaurant that was whites only? Like,
that was normal.
It was normal. Yeah, it was normal at the time. But I wonder how much of this is it learned behavior or are we evolving to something that is beyond our current comprehension of norms?
Chris Ryan talks about the fact in his book, Sex at Dawn, how culture is evolving faster than we are. And
yes.
That's where the problem comes from, that gap.
We are a chimp with a flamethrower.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, what do we do? And so we have to look for ways to go home and numb yourself. Because otherwise it's too painful. So television is a way, drugs, denial, lots of ways to avoid facing reality. Truth is hard, but truth will protect you when you do face it.
There's a guy in the documentary who is a rapper in Brazil.
Don Blanquito.
Right. But in his story, there is a Kubrickian time cut. In the same way that Moonwatcher's bone became an orbiting satellite, there's this sudden, drastic 7-year jump. How did you know? Have you been working on this documentary for 7 years,
yes.
or was that from something else?
No, 7 years.
Tell us the story of Don Blanquito.
He was my first interview, and I used him as a guinea pig.
How do you know Don Blanquito?
I met him. He was a friend of a friend's son, and when I was traveling to Sao Paulo for a film festival when I was traveling to Sao Paulo Film Festival for my prior documentary, The Nature of Existence, I met him for lunch. And as a documentarian or a person, you get a sense from people when they have charisma.
Yep, he does.
He belongs on camera. So I came back 4 months later and interviewed him. Luckily, I got there just in time because he met this woman 6 months later who he married. Went from the most single possible person I'd ever met in my life.
Yes.
He had a song, Single Forever.
Yeah.
He sang about being single forever.
And he's an American guy that lived in Brazil.
He went there, learned Portuguese, learned how to rap so he could meet women.
Yeah, learned another language, and then learned how to rap in that language. And he's white, so that's 2 strikes. And he does it well.
Yes.
So clearly there's intellect. There's an intellectual power there. But he's also like a pure idiot. When you first see him talking about his goals in life, and it's like
he's the epitome of a guy, a young guy.
He's a bro. He's a real bro.
We start out kind of in that.
He's a lot about
area of
quote unquote nutting
mentality.
Yeah.
But then we grow up and we go through life changes, and we learn life lessons. Every relationship, hopefully, you learn something. He learned quickly when he met this woman who changed his life.
Yeah.
And cut to 7 years later, he's got a child and he's married. And completely unexpected. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
But as a documentarian,
and did you follow him this whole time, or did you reach out to get back in touch with him?
I got back in touch with all of the couples I had been following to see what had happened 3, 5, 7 years later.
Right.
To do follow-ups, Michael Apted style.
Right. Yes.
When I started making the documentary, I didn't know that's what I would do. I just started filming.
Where is Michael Apted now? Is he at like 98 up or something?
Oh, it's in the high numbers. It's 50s, I think.
Yeah. No, I think it's more.
Maybe 60s. Yeah.
Yeah. 60s or 70s.
It's up there.
Yeah. Yeah. Eventually, it's just going to be like one person.
Who's the last survivor?
Yeah, that's going to be very fascinating. Well, Michael Apted passed.
Somebody will have to keep this going.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So so his was the most shocking, and he lives here in L.A. now.
Yeah, with his wife and daughter.
Is he still a rapper?
Yeah, but he's got a more traditional job because he's got a family.
Right.
You got to.
But he seems to do well. They have a really nice house. He seems to be doing very well.
Smart guy.
Yeah. Who
just had a goal in mind and he pursued it single-mindedly.
Yeah.
And it led to an unexpected consequence.
And it really is. This is certainly a, broad stroke description, but he was a guy who thought he had it all figured out until he met a woman that told him he didn't know anything.
Yeah.
or that let him think that while she completely turned him inside out.
Isn't that what happens a lot?
It does happen a lot. Yeah, it does happen a lot. It's really sweet and funny. And were there any results that surprised you?
All of them. I was surprised constantly because it's like an old Woody Allen joke. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Right.
Nothing ever goes the way you expect, and it didn't with any of the couples that I interviewed. And all these couples were randomly chosen, people who invited me to their wedding.
Right.
Or I knew. And so I just went and started bringing my camera and interviewing them because I started wondering why are they so enthusiastic? 50% are going to fail. One of the psychologists in the documentary put it this way. He said that nobody expects that their relationship is going to end when they're getting married.
Right.
Everyone has that similar delusion.
Well, they say
Bill Doherty,
till death do you part.
Yeah, Dr. Bill Doherty put it that way, and it's always a surprise when it comes. And so you've got to be ready to change, and things are not going to be what you expect. Rachel Hope, who's one of the people I interviewed, put it this way: you can't promise to love somebody forever. How do you promise to have a feeling forever? You don't have control over your feelings. What you can do is promise to behave lovingly towards someone forever. Behavior is something that you can register. And even through a divorce or through the hard times, you can still behave lovingly. And that's a much better promise, I think. More
yes.
Doable one.
There is that couple that it's a May-December romance. She seems to be from another country.
She came from Prague. Yeah,
right.
A screenwriter friend of mine married a woman from Prague that he met at a party at my house.
Right. He did not go to Prague to meet a woman, and she wasn't a mail order bride.
No, she came here.
Right.
Came to the U.S. on vacation and was at a party and they met and connected. The chemicals were right. And so they dated for years, long distance, back and forth until they got married.
Wow. In Prague. And then she moved to the United States. And their marriage lasted
5 years.
Yeah.
I checked in as they were signing the divorce papers.
Right. But it seems to be the most amicable divorce.
They became friends over time. It was you could say it was a transactional marriage.
Sure.
They both got what they intended to get out of it. And then they realized it's time to move forward in our lives in a different direction.
Right. Are they still friends?
They became better friends after the divorce. He says that in the movie that the last year of their marriage was very difficult and they were not as close of friends as they were once they got divorced. And now they could talk to each other about anything without fear of jealousy or anger.
Right. Either one of them remarried?
Not yet. But human nature, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
Comes around again.
Right. And the polyamorous couple in Eugene, Oregon.
Still together, still happy. I just traveled with them to the Barbados Film Festival with the film. And they are a happy, high-functioning couple.
That's amazing. Kids?
Not yet.
No. Can you raise a kid on a Ren Fair farm in
People
Oregon?
do it.
Yeah.
You can raise them in just about any hard scrabble environment.
Right. Yeah, that's really true.
I mean, sometimes if you raise a kid with too many cushions and soft edges, they're not prepared for life.
That is very true. My children are like veal. They're doomed. No, it is true. There was that documentary about the guy, the surfer, the doctor that traveled around the country with his kids, surfing all the time and took him out of school. And if he had $1, he would spend it immediately, and then they'd have no money, and then he'd go work like in a clinic or something. Did you ever see that? It's a really weird documentary, and it's really about a malignant narcissist. And all of his kids grow up, they all fucking hate him, and it's because he was just like, I have this weird, I want to just drive around the country and surf, and these kids want to go to school and they want to have friends, and they don't want to wonder when their next meal is going to come from all the time. It does seem to be a movie about a malignant narcissist, but It is, all those kids are, they'll go to the opposite of that. They're all like in very stable homes in Pasadena. You tend to go for the thing that you didn't have previously.
Everybody wonders or thinks they know the way to raise children. I don't have children. How do I know? But the tribal way was the way that humans used to interact and raise children. And in a tribal community, a child has many adults.
It takes a village, is the point. Yeah.
And they can learn different things from all these different adults. And if they lose one, they still have many others. They don't have to worry that they're going to lose everything if they lose one parent or both parents.
Right. What of the documentaries that you've made, what is the one that you carry with you the most?
It's hard to top the first, right? There's nothing like the first time.
Right.
And Trekkies is a special documentary.
Yeah, Trekkies is it's a mainstream famous hit.
And it's just, it has a heart.
It has a heart. It's beautifully, it's very funny, but it's beautifully funny. It's not, you never laugh at your subjects. And I just, the woman that goes on jury duty, I find it beautiful. It's just so beautiful.
The first love is always a special love.
Yeah.
6 Days in Roswell is probably the funniest film I've ever made.
Right.
Because it's hard to top alien enthusiasts for being unusual.
Bigfoot enthusiasts. Bob Goldthwait knows.
That might do it. Okay.
The Bob Dylan of the Bigfoot community. This guy that writes songs and records albums all about Bigfoot.
Obsession is what's interesting.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I look for obsession in my documentaries.
Yeah.
In The Nature of Existence, that was probably the most cathartic film I made because I had a lot of, the Germans called it Weltschmerz or angst, like just anxiety about why am I here? What's the point? I interviewed Julia Sweeney, who you know,
sure,
for that documentary, and asked her a lot of tough questions. And one of them was, how do we find happiness? That's what it is, right? We all just want to be happier. And she said, that's a false goal. It's a side effect of having a purpose in life. You can't pursue happiness. It's not a thing you can pursue. But if you have a purpose...
And yet the pursuit of happiness is, because it's a common expression, people assume it's like soulmates.
It's a diversion. You need to know what your purpose is. When you're pursuing your purpose, you're naturally happy. And a purpose is something you have to give yourself. For me, what I learned from that documentary is I think human beings' purpose, we're all the same, right? Inside, we have the same needs. Our purpose is to be creative daily in some way.
Yeah.
So if you have a job that's not creative, that's going to be a little bit soul-crushing. What you need to do is carve out a little time every day to be creative. And it doesn't matter how. You could be writing a story or a poem, writing something, composing music, make a new dance, plant a garden, bring forth life, architect, designing a house, anything. The default becomes trying to raise a small version of yourself up into a better version, and that takes 18 years or maybe longer if you can't kick them out of the basement.
Yeah.
But once that's over, you're back where you started. What do I do now? And then people take up pottery classes or dance classes or something where they can express themselves creatively. If you carve out 20 minutes a day to be creative in some way, bring forth a positive something and present it to the world, to your community, that's where you'll find happiness. And to me, that was a very cathartic film to make and a lesson to learn from exploring different religions and belief systems.
That's really true. And I love the idea of the myth of the pursuit of happiness, that happiness is a side effect of having a purpose. Is that what she said?
Yes.
That's really...
Yeah, that struck me as well.
Yeah.
Resonated. It stayed with me. But then back to your question, what's my favorite project? I mean, it's always the most recent one, the last one.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
And I'm just absorbed with this idea of this, what is a good relationship and why is it so hard? I just set out as the investigator to solve that mystery in the film. And you come with me and you learn how to make it. The first half of the film is, well, here's why we're doing everything wrong. We're all doing relationships wrong, some less wrong than others. And then the second half shifts into, well, now that we're here, what do we do about it? And there are some very specific, simple things that anyone can do just to change the trajectory of your relationship toward a happier. You don't have to do any of those things if you don't want to be happier.
Right.
But if you do, try this. Very simple, like say thank you. Verbalize gratitude daily. Any type of thank you for picking up the groceries today, honey. Thank you for waking me up when I overslept. Thank you for being a wonderful person. Thank you. Whatever. Find reasons to say thank you. You can't do it too much. The problem is we don't do it enough.
Yeah, I find that interesting, and this is going to be a whole other sidebar that we'll have to get into on another interview. All of those things make sense. And I'm interested in how phones are affecting behavior.
Right, texting. Yeah, it's not as good as face-to-face.
Or Twitter, which is just an aggravation.
And a lack of subtext and body language.
Yeah, and it's just a way to fight. It's just a fight. You can literally tweet like, "I really love banana bread," and it's just a matter of time before someone will say like, "Oh, well, it's great that you can afford banana bread." Like, okay, yeah, I know.
What about the bananas? Did you ever think of them?
It's true. No, it's just a matter of time, and
but there are antidotes to that.
I'm wondering, are we going to throw it? Like, are we going to outgrow it? Are we going to modulate it? Are we going to throw it away? Who's going to win?
Well, what is winning? Winning is being a little happier daily in your relationship.
I mean, who's going to win? The man or the phone? Are we going to eventually tame the phone?
Well, we're all going to go extinct as a species at some point. Yeah. Are you going to focus on that, or focus on daily on your relationship and make it a little better?
Right.
That's one thing you can do. There are little relationship hacks that will vastly improve your happiness. And that's what and when I wrote the book to go with it, I laid it out as clearly as possible. Simple things that anyone can do.
Right. Now, last question. Are you in a relationship now?
No, single. Part of the irony of this pursuit.
Right. But you're so loaded you're loaded for bear now.
I have a date Thursday night.
Okay.
And I go much more prepared now for how to interact with the opposite sex, with other human beings, with how to listen properly, how to pay attention to someone, how to empathize with someone, how to be present. It's about being present in the moment. What phones do and TV and other things that we've created do is it takes us out of the presence. We're no longer present with the person we're with. You need to make eye contact, listen to someone, ask them questions, and then shut up.
Sure.
That's so hard to do.
What I do is when I was single, I'd go on a date, and we would sit down, and then I would notice that their lips were moving and that they were probably talking. I would just be thinking about whatever I wanted to think about. And then when I saw their lips would stop moving, I would reach across the table and say, "Look, the solution to your problem is in my pants."
You made multiple errors on that play.
No, it's so funny. Not even in a romantic way. I tell my daughters, "You want to be popular? Ask people questions and listen.
And then shut up."
Yeah.
And
people
empathize.
People love, boy, do they love to talk about themselves.
But if you can show empathy, and what is empathy? It means saying, "Wow, no wonder you feel that way."
Yeah. Yeah. And it just changes everything. And that is like, in terms of Twitter specifically, it's an empathyless.
I'll give you
device.
here's another tip that I learned. It's called capitalization. When your partner comes home and says something good happened to him or her, let's say your girlfriend comes home, your significant other, "A great thing happened to me today." If you don't say, "Wow, that's great, I'm so happy for you," it counts against you.
Sure.
And when you do say it, it increases both your happiness level for the whole week.
Yep.
And it lingers. So you miss an opportunity every time you don't capitalize on your partner's achievements.
"A great thing happened to me today." And part of you goes, "Well, you know what happened to me?" What is the answer? What? Tell me. I want to know. Yeah, you have to get outside of yourself, and that is, to me, what was so great about becoming a parent, and I think it's where I made my mistakes in my marriage. Was I didn't do that enough, but when the kids came. The beautiful lesson was, it's not about me anymore. It's about them. Mm-hmm. And like, if they are, because I had, we're both in show business, and there's so many metrics of success that we flail ourselves with. And they didn't matter. It was like, if they're happy and they're safe, great, I win. I've done it. And that was, and that was for me, it was really a huge thing that changed my life. But I also came with the fear of, and this is where what Julia said comes into play.
Julia Sweeney.
Yeah. Because and then they're all going to grow up, and I'm going to be a lonely divorced guy with nothing in my life, and I'm going to blow my brains out the day after I drop my youngest off at college, but that didn't work out. My life is
there's
ridiculously
something else in your future that's unexpected. You don't know what the future is going to bring. You can't predict it. There's amazing, wonderful things ahead.
If you leave the house.
Yes.
You got to leave the house.
Interact with people, with humanity.
Yeah.
And here's another tip. Tell your woman, your feminine partner, how...
Or your fella. Or your... whoever you're with.
It's more of a masculine feminine thing. It's not a gay straight. It's about masculine and feminine interactivity. And passion comes from that polarity. And the masculine needs to tell the feminine that you are the one. You are special. You are mine over all others, and to vocalize that and express it. Mm-hmm. And we don't. We forget. We habituate. We get into patterns.
Sure.
And you need to remind yourself.
Or just like a dog. I'll just pee a little bit on their clothing when they're in the shower.
Yeah, not good enough.
Oops.
Other podcasts reach for the sky. Dana Gould bound. We barely try.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley, with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano.
Hey, if you like the show, why don't you drop us a line at show@danagould.com. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out. You want me? Peace out. Boom.